This is Rock Hard Riffs. Well, hey there guys, this is Rock Hard Riffs, the rock and roll guitar channel for the self-taught. In today's video, we're going to change the strings on this Epiphone Vivian Campbell Holy Diver Les Paul. That isn't a mouthful. And as you can see, we have a different kind of bridge on here. This is the Floyd Rose FRX. Your guitar does not need any kind of routing or screws or anything put into the guitar, and that's why I got this. It's pretty cool. It's not quite as, say, responsive as a Floyd Rose or regular Floyd Rose, but it's pretty cool. It does its job. You know, you just like anything, you just have to get used to it. Now let's take a closer look at it real quick. So here we have a close-up of it. Now this operates pretty much exactly the same as a regular Floyd Rose. You've got these little guys here which adjust right here. This pulls back. This is a little block that's in there. And make sure that when you change the strings on a Floyd Rose, if you're not familiar with it, that you have the guitar laying back a bit at least, because these little blocks will come out and they'll fall out. So you got to make sure you keep an eye on that. So again, we just adjust these with an Allen wrench from the back, and you unscrew it, and the little block moves back. You cut the ball end of the string off, and you just insert it in there. Then you tighten this back up, and that's basically it. As you see, guys, here we have a brass nut, and here is a floating Floyd Rose locking nut. There's no need to remove this nut. You can just let this float and just kind of butt it up against the brass nut, and away you go. And it operates exactly the same way. You just put the strings right through there, and of course you loosen this again with your trusty Allen wrench, and you loosen this and you feed the screw through there, and away you go. So it operates exactly just the same. I just wanted it floating there as an experiment, for one, and number two, so you don't have to remove anything else. It does work. Okay guys, so as you see in these pictures here that I have, the Floyd Rose goes into the body of the guitar. That has to be routed out. And as you can see, there are those little screws there that loosen and tighten, again, the clamp to put the string in, as you see there. So it operates exactly the same way. The locking nut on this particular guitar, now you can see how the locking nut is actually mounted, just like a normal nut, and it's mounted right there onto the guitar, and it's screwed into the guitar. Again, that's another reason why I'd use the floating nut, because I didn't want it screwed in. I didn't want to put any holes in the guitar if I didn't have to, and I didn't have to, so we got lucky. Alright guys, so let's rock and roll. Let's change the strings on this baby. So first thing, heads up, first thing to do when we go to change the strings on the Floyd here is to, of course, unlock the strings at the locking nut. And that's important because you, you want to get the strings off of there. Now, how I do it is when I go to change strings, normally what I'll do, unless I need to do like a real deep cleaning or something like that, is I will change the 6th string, then the 1st string, then the 5th, then the 2nd, and so on, right? Kind of like changing a tire, right? You don't go in a circle when you change a tire. You go bolt, 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 you know, crossing, right? So I do the same thing just so it doesn't stress the neck too much. Okay, and then of course we loosen the strings. We just loosen the string just enough so we can cut it. As you can see, the string is loose, so we just take our trusty little Allen wrench, and I'm going to loosen this so I can get the string out of there. You don't have to pull it out all the way, just loosen it enough so that the string will come out, and there it is, right? So you can see how deep that goes in there. And that's it. That's all there is to it. Now we're going to take our E string here, and I'm going to cut off the ball end. Right? So I'm going to cut the ball off, and then just insert it. And of course you have to cut it back to where there are no little winds that are going around it. If you can see that, there are little winds going around if you're familiar with a guitar string. And you just cut it right behind that. and insert it into that clamp, and away you go. Now I'm going to insert it into here, and I'm going to take my little Allen wrench. Tighten that back up. Okay, that's good. It's in there, but I'm just going to make sure it's good and snug. You don't have to crank down on it, but of course you want to make sure that it's tight enough that the string won't fly out, right? So right there, that's really good right there. Okay. Another thing that you want to do is to adjust take your adjustment screws and put them in so they're about halfway in and halfway out, right? So you can adjust either sharp or flat as needed, right? So this one is right about halfway there. That's looking pretty good. So now I'm just going to take my string as usual. I'm going to feed it through my locking nut into the tuning peg there. Okay guys, the E-string is changed. And it's just that simple. There's really nothing to it. The only kind of bummer about the Floyd Rose is that when you go to tune it up, you have to keep tuning it and keep tuning it and keep tuning it. It's strings versus springs. If you picture like a Stratocaster, if you look at the back of it, it has that big space there that have the springs in it that provide the tension against the strings, and that's the whole 9 yards. Alright guys, let's go ahead and change the rest of these strings, and I'll get right back with you. Okay guys, we are done. We have changed all the strings. As you can see there, I did not wind these down. Mr. BHS recommends that you do that, but under different circumstances, and so I just wound this normally. So if you're curious what I use Ernie Ball 9 gauge Super Slinkies. Great strings, I highly recommend them. Again, that's Ernie Ball Super Slinky 9 gauge. Guys, as you can see, this is sitting on a guitar stand. This works great, but you have to make sure that you really secure the guitar into the stand. One thing you got to pay real close attention to is this little rubber piece that goes on here. You got to make sure that that thing is all the way down there, you know, real snug in there, because if not, this thing will pop off. It'll just pop right off. Same with the back. There's another one on the back side, and of course the bottom attachment as well. And you've really got to lock it in there. There are a couple knobs on the back side of just this side here that you screw in. You tighten them down. You've really got to tighten those down. So that's really important when you're working on these things. Now the next question you might have is when to change your strings. How often do you change your strings? Sometimes the strings will feel kind of, I don't know if rusty is the right word or like corroded, but they just don't feel so slick as they used to. That to me is like a sign. It's like, oh, there might be time to change the strings. Also, you're going to just not get as much reaction from the string, say, as you once had, like with your vibrato. Right? You get less reaction with older strings. They just start to kind of stretch out. And so that's another way for me to tell that it's time to change the strings. Now, I don't need new strings all the time. Some people will change them after every like couple hours or every few hours of playing. No, I'll get lots of hours out of each set of strings, because boy, that gets expensive. And if you're a rock star, that's great and fine if you can do that, right? But I'm not, and I don't have that kind of cash. So there we go, we're somewhat in tune. Now from this point I just plug it in and you know, get everything as close to it as I can, then lock down the locking nut and work in the fine tuners from there. But again, you want the fine tuners about halfway out, halfway in sort of thing, depending if, you know, your guitar tends to go sharp a lot or flat a lot or not anything at all a lot. So, but it's great to have them about halfway out, halfway in, however you want to look at it. Alright guys, so that's changing the strings on a Floyd Rose FRX, and it's the same exact process with the normal Floyd Rose, nothing different at all, which is great if you're used to that. Alright guys, we really appreciate you watching. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next video.